You're listening to Preston's Poetry Podcast?
You're listening to Preston's Poetry Podcast.
The Danish theologian and philosopher Søren Kierkegaard thought that there were two kinds of eras: ages of passion and ages of reflection or understanding. Now, in ages of passion, he thought, emotion and inspiration lead the way. Humans achieve fantastic feats, and we collectively marvel at those feats. Think of this metal-chested, decorated Olympian, the first voyage to new places never gone to before, discovering cures for impossible diseases, inventing new fantastic symphonies, and so on. Well, that is an age of passion. In his work, Present Age, though, he believed he was not in an age of passion, but in an age of reflection. Now, that sounds nice, but he didn't exactly mean it like that. In ages of reflection, he said, people instead talk about passionate things, break them down, analyze them, reflect on them, study them, but never actually go out and achieve them. In all of that, he talked about a phenomenon called leveling. Leveling is essentially just this attitude or comments or set of behaviors aimed at bringing down any genius, any passion, any greatness to an average level, leveling. Think back to that decorated Olympian. We could see them win their umpteenth gold medal and feel excited by their achievement, inspired, and marvel at this human triumph. Or there could be this part of us that says, well, they did it, so I bet with enough work I could too. Or as I find myself with some Olympic fencers, oh, them again? Boring. Yeah, of course they won. He said that there's this endless chatter like we see on the news. There's no real news, just a bunch of people commenting on the news. We can be absorbed by the horrors of one war that just broke out. But as soon as we receive news of another tragedy, another bombing, another war, our attention spans instantly switch to another. It's as if we are ready to be entertained, to have our boredom absorbed, to engage our desire to explain the world and not, as in an age of passion, to take the bull by the horns and change the world. Because if we do, we're liable to be met not with cheers or even boos, but with melancholy or laughter. Last time I talked about Gerard Manley Hopkins' My Own Heart, Let Me More Have Pity On, and this idea of form following function. Well, today is a great example of form following function, and it also reflects the same attitude towards ages of passion and ages of reflection that Kierkegaard was talking about. It's by Edwin Arlington Robinson, and I like this poem a lot. It's called Miniver, Cheevy, and it is a little bit more ambiguous about the matter than Kierkegaard was. I think the way we read it may very well be a sounding board or mirror for us to see just what kind of attitude we have towards human greatness. Now, I have my reading of it, and we'll get to that, but first, listen to see what you think. Miniver Cheevy by Edwin Arlington Robinson. Miniver Cheevy, child of scorn, grew lean while he assailed the seasons. He wept that he was ever born, and he had reasons. Miniver loved the days of old when swords were bright and steeds were prancing. The vision of a warrior bold would set him dancing. Miniver sighed for what was not, and dreamed and rested from his labors. He dreamed of Thebes and Camelot and Priam's neighbors. Miniver mourned the ripe renown that made so many a name so fragrant. He mourned romance now on the town and art a vagrant. Miniver loved the Medici, albeit he had never seen one. He would have sinned incessantly could he have been one. Miniver cursed the commonplace and eyed a khaki suit with loathing. He missed the medieval grace of iron clothing. Miniver scorned the gold he sought, but sore annoyed was he without it. Miniver thought, and thought, and thought, and thought about it. Miniver Cheevy, born too late, scratched his head and kept on thinking. Miniver coughed and called it fate and kept on drinking. So I'm curious, what do you think of Miniver Cheevy? How do you feel after that last line, and kept on drinking? There's some interesting word choice here that is subtly rhetorical. So another way that we can dissect poems is not to just pay attention to what the words mean, but to see those words as a choice. Robinson picked certain words over other words. For instance, the poem starts, Miniver Cheevy, child of scorn, meaning that Miniver Cheevy is kind of a loser. But saying Miniver Cheevy, what a loser, got skinny from season to season, means the same thing, but yet very much does not. Now we're breaching this kind of thing where poetics has a different set of definitions. There's some other thing about words than, well, the way we use them normally. If Robinson said, Miniver Cheevy, a total loser, instead of child of scorn, we would approach this image very differently. Including the word child gives Miniver a kind of innocence, makes him a little pitiful rather than just some loser, and the word scorn overemphasizes the negativity toward him. From my view, Robinson is intentionally making this guy a victim, pitiful. We are supposed to pity him. Then there's the next line, grew lean while he assailed the seasons. Includes a couple of interesting choices. The late poet Mary Oliver wrote a wonderful short book called A Poetry Handbook that might as well replace this podcast. I recently read it and thought, man, if she had just broken down a few more poems, my whole podcast would have been much less necessary. We agree on so much, Mary Oliver and I. One particular thing that I instinctively knew but never realized was this idea that the sounds of words also gives them a certain poetic value. I think the example she gives is brilliant, and it's the difference between stone and rock. You might think that those mean about the same thing, that they're synonyms, but in poetry, they are absolutely not. They are poetic opposites. Why? Well, stone begins with harsh sounds, st, st, and ends rounded and open with on. It's open-throated and warm. Rock, on the other hand, is the reverse. It's nasally rock and ends in the k. In effect, in poetry, stone is warm, round, like a river stone, smooth. You can cradle it. It's kind. It sits in your palm. Rock, on the other hand, is jagged, off-putting, harsh, inimical. So when we look at the words grew lean while he assailed the seasons, grew lean have long sounds that you could hold out. It's like it's stretching it, mirroring his leanness. And then assailed the seasons contains a lot of S sounds, sounding like a snake, sinister, difficult. Assailing seasons also means to struggle, that he fights the seasons like a dragon or something. Then the next lines. He wept that he was ever born, and he had reasons. He wept that he was ever born has a lot of these open sounds too. He wept that he was ever born. How sad for Miniver. But then there's this rather short, and he had reasons. It falls flat, short, like no effort was given at all to stick the landing of this last line. It hits hard, Like Miniver is not worth the effort. So also in terms of beats, these last lines are short, partial lines, and I think it's done to make him not just look like a dreamer, but also to make him this child of scorn, to maybe even bully him, to give us this impression that he's not a romantic, he's a total loser. He would have sinned incessantly, could he have been one. But would he have, though? Would he have sinned incessantly? I mean, he can sin incessantly now. Nothing's keeping him from that, right? Or this line: he missed the medieval grace of iron clothing. Now, I doubt Miniver has ever worn iron clothing, much less experienced medieval grace. So another feeling I have is this tinge of dark humor. For these short last lines, it sounds like a punchline, and I want to laugh at Miniver. I think Miniver is not just pitiful, I think he's a kind of loser. I imagine him as this guy who is not just unlovable and pitiful. I kind of imagine him as kind of a bad guy, a coward, someone with little self-control or ambition. You know, he might even be sort of stupid. Miniver scorned the gold he sought. That is, he again scorns, a word borrowed from above. So it's not an original idea anymore. And he's saying he wishes he didn't have to keep working for money and says gold instead of money. But of course, he doesn't scorn it too much because, quote, sore annoyed was he without it. But what does Miniver do about it? Miniver scorned the gold he sought, yet sore annoyed was he without it. Miniver thought, and thought, and thought, and then what? And thought about it. That's a lot of thinking. Maybe it's not an easy task for Miniver. So we're also pushed to see him not just pitiful, but to join in belittling him. And Robinson makes us feel that way with some tricky poetic subtlety, with open or harsh sounds, and these short lines. There's this idea that poems can be immediately understandable, written the way that we talk, and that might be the better poem. But I think that's a rather adolescent and untrained view of art and poetry. I think of that idea like low-rate punk music. Yeah, there's a lot of craft behind making readers feel a certain way. And there are even more examples, so let's continue. The poem goes on to describe this kind of loser who dreams of Camelot or Renaissance family empires like the Medici. He feels a certain forlornness that these mythologies aren't reflected in his own lifetime. Quote, Miniver sighed for what was not, and dreamed and rested from his labors. He dreamed of Thebes and Camelot, and Priam's neighbors, Priam being the last king of Troy. We get a picture of this guy, a real dreamer, a lover of fantasy, just some poor normal dude who was born in the wrong place at the wrong time. He may be a loser, he may even be an idiot, but then comes this subtle turn, the final lines. Miniver Cheevy, born too late, scratched his head and kept on thinking. Miniver coughed and called it fate and kept on drinking. Robinson says Miniver was born too late, and then as this sort of like apish set of descriptions where Miniver scratches his head and then again thinking, coughing, and chalking it up to fate. But this last line, and kept on drinking, sets us back in a more modern setting. It's true that there's mention of khaki suits earlier, but then it's replaced immediately by the idea of iron armor pretty quickly. But having the last words and kept on drinking, I get the feeling like it's not just Miniver. It's our age. It's our era. I feel a pain in my gut when I read that. I don't see Miniver at a distance anymore. I see myself in Miniver, as much of a loser as he may be. I imagine this man who could have maybe been someone great with the right lineage, the right star alignment, circumstances and such, but things just didn't work out that way. He's been emasculated. Now, there's a final poetic tool that Robinson uses to do that, and I didn't even know that this was a thing until I read Mary Oliver's book. The poem has a rhyme scheme, A, B, A, B. Lines 1 and 3 rhyme, and lines 2 and 4 rhyme, A, B, A, B. Now, we've talked about rhymes before. I knew there were types of rhyme. What I didn't know is that there are types of end rhyme. I had no idea there was a traditional concept of two types of end rhyme, which are masculine and feminine rhyme. Masculine rhymes end in one-syllable stressed words. Miniver, Cheevy, child of scorn. He wept that he was ever born. Miniver loved the days of old, the vision of a warrior bold. Miniver, Cheevy, born too late. Miniver coughed and called it fate. So all of those, scorn, born, old, bold, late, fate, are one-syllable stressed words, making these end rhymes masculine rhymes. Feminine rhymes, on the other hand, occur in two-syllable words, and the rhyme is on the unstressed part. Grew lean while he assailed the seasons, and he had reasons. When swords were bright and steeds were prancing, would set him dancing. And eyed a khaki suit with loathing of iron clothing. Scratched his head and kept on thinking, and kept on drinking. Seasons, reasons, prancing, dancing, loathing, clothing, thinking, drinking. These are feminine end rhymes because the rhymes occur on unstressed syllables, and it's a two-syllable thing. Actually, these are called double rhymes because thinking, drinking, both syllables rhyme. But in any case, these are feminine rhymes because they're not short one-syllable stressed rhymes. Masculine rhymes are short one-syllable stressed rhymes, and feminine end rhymes are unstressed. Now, what's interesting about this is that lines 1 and 3 are masculine rhymes. But then it goes on to 2 and 4, which are feminine rhymes. In each stanza, what starts as masculine ends as feminine. Robinson literally emasculates Miniver through the rhymes. Even this short last line, and he had reasons, is a feminine rhyme. And it's cut short, so I get this image that he's not even attractive to women, that nobody loves him. Now, this scheme is not even consistent either, such as this one. Miniver loved the Medici, albeit he had never seen one. He would have sinned incessantly, could he have been one. Medici and incessantly are both feminine, but the masculine ones are lame. Albeit he had never seen one, could he have been one. One is a single syllable, it is unstressed, and it's the same word. It's a totally failed attempt at masculine rhyme. So there's a lot going on in this poem, and I wanted in this episode to show an even more dense example about how the form of the poem functions, how it works together with the core message. This whole system of these tools that poets use is called prosody. It's a crucial tool to getting the most out of writing a poem and also to reading it. As a reader, it helps really pick poems apart like this, because there's more to find underneath our bare first reading. And I think it shows a level of craft from the poet's part that ought to be appreciated. Anyway, all of that in mind, with the open and harsh sounds, with counting beats, as well as feminine masculine rhymes, having really torn this one to shreds today, let's file all of that knowledge of word choices and sounds and rhymes, all of that, in the back of our heads for a minute and just listen again, shall we? Miniver, Cheevy by Edwin Arlington Robinson. Miniver, Cheevy, child of scorn, grew lean while he assailed the seasons. He wept that he was ever born, and he had reasons. Miniver loved the days of old, when swords were bright and steeds were prancing, The vision of a warrior bold would set him dancing. Miniver sighed for what was not, and dreamed and rested from his labors. He dreamed of Thebes and Camelot and Priam's neighbors. Miniver mourned the ripe renown that made so many a name so fragrant. He mourned romance, now on the town, and art, a vagrant. Miniver loved the Medici, albeit he had never seen one. He would have sinned incessantly could he have been one. Miniver cursed the commonplace and eyed a khaki suit with loathing. He missed the medieval grace of iron clothing. Miniver scorned the gold he sought, but sore annoyed was he without it. Miniver thought, and thought, and thought, and thought about it. Miniver Cheevy, born too late, scratched his head and kept on thinking. Miniver coughed and called it fate, and kept on drinking. There are many other prosodic or poetic bits of genius to be found here. Take the name Cheevy, for instance. But anyway, let me know if you find more. When I read Miniver Cheevy, I think about this present age. I also wonder if art is lost, if we're living in this age of reflection and not of passion. Whether ages of passion, though, could also contain some dangerous leaders. I often find myself being a little Miniver Cheevy-ish, wanting something, missing simpler times. But I also wonder whether they were simpler at all, or whether I'm just dreaming. Now, I myself have written a sonnet actually in this style. It's about a guy called Tobias Creed who thinks the end of the world is on its way, believes in crazy conspiracy theories, and dreams of days gone by. Maybe one day you guys can hear it, but if you want to try it, I challenge you to write a poem with some rhyme scheme about a kind of person that you think is pitiable. Think of a way of being that you think is problematic. Give a name to that person and write a poet about them. Really let them have it. Rake them through the coals. Bonus points if you can somehow end your poem with a redeeming dose of bittersweet charity toward them. After giving them a good right bullying, make us feel like maybe we're not so different after all.